There we are. Please do vote, Mentimeter, chat all you want with us, and get your webcams on. It's good to see each other. It's kind of like being in person, but not a super spreader event. So yeah, we got a few things we'll be hitting here today. And let's get into the multi-jurisdiction SEM. Okay. So this is a topic. All of our topics we cover in our webinars are voted on by the paying members, dues paying members of the SEM Collaborative. So please do become members. That's a quick little plug because there's all kinds of cool benefits of being a member, including getting to decide what we get to talk about. And so this was the notion that came up. And so I wanted to call out like 3 examples as I see that. These types of multi-jurisdiction SEM. So one is where you have a geography that has multiple same fuel utilities working together across that geography. So then this would make sense if you have, let's say in the Puget Sound area, there's kind of 4 big utilities, 4 big electric utilities. Well, it gets really messy, but we'll say 4 big utilities that provide electric service. Okay, and so if you get a company there, for example, Microsoft, they've got campuses all over the place, or other big companies that have campuses or different kinds of facilities. And so if they're trying to take one kind of holistic view at how they do things, having a program that kind of expands things, or having similar programs that are pretty similar to each other can make good sense. There's some other good reasons that use case could work. Next one is one utility that works across multiple geographies. For example, well, again, I'll use Seattle, or the Seattle area. Puget Sound Energy spans multiple municipalities. It's like Bellevue and Redmond and many other cities of their area. And so in that case, they may work, their program, instead of working with other electric, or actually they're also dual fuel, other electric or gas utilities, which they sometimes do, they can also work with government programs, be it from the county level, they work across multiple counties, or be it from those local cities. And so some do have programs and some don't. If you're familiar with like a CPACE or PACE programs, basically like those property assessed clean energy financing programs that sometimes government agencies have, then that could be again an example of those things. And lastly, I would say is multiple utilities with different fuels working together across the geography. So it could be, and again, I'll pick on the Puget Sound area, a facility in downtown Seattle typically would get their electricity from Seattle City Light and would typically get their gas from Puget Sound Energy. So again, then they may can be subscribing to programs that it could make sense. Okay, do you all follow those 3? And again, it's kind of a lot to it. So again, one is multiple the same fuel across a big not across a big geography, across a multi-utility geography. Second is one utility or more that work across with multiple like agencies, I would say, like government types of agencies perhaps. And then lastly could be multiple in the same space, like a gas and electric kind of provider. Again, could be an example. So those are 3 I just called out. Now I told you we're going to be warming up to do some polling. The next question, it's not all pumpkin spice. What other types of multi-jurisdiction SEM are there? So if you already closed your phone, open back up, it'll still work. Menti.com, type in 5690192. And this question should have refreshed. It's an open text, so you can type in whatever you like, but try not to make it pumpkin related. And again, I'm going to flash this slide back up while you are typing that in. So as a refresher, here are the types that I called out. Multiple same fuel utilities working across the geography. One utility across multiple geographies, engaging multiple, I'll say municipalities or government agencies, and then multiple utilities in the same geography. like in the same site. So what other options are there? Okay, these are great. Energy and water. Love it. Not what would come to mind for a lot of folks, and it's very important. I know Cascade's done some really cool stuff. I think I remember seeing a presentation. Oh gosh, Pam, you may have been there back in Denver. About, I think it was, yeah, where they're engaging with that water. It was like a water program, but it wasn't a waste. It was related to wastewater, but it's
fresh water.
It was freshwater.
District, yeah.
Yeah, the looping and leaping and all that stuff. Yeah. That's, by the way, is a sign of a good presentation if I'm remembering some of that. I think you covered them all. Non-utility, like agencies across multiple geographies. A market transformation agency. Oh, nice. Yeah. So like a couple I would call out a RIO, like a NIA or a SIA, like a Northwest Energy Efficiency Alliance or a NEEP. But also there's other groups that do programs. So
right, can you even say it's like a NYSERDA in New York?
Oh yeah, NYSERDA. Although yeah, we can call it. I was thinking of the IMT, the Institute for Market Transformation. It's kind of obvious in their name, but there's some other ones that focus on certain types of programs. Different sites, yeah. For like, so for one company that has different sites, mixed commercial and industrial spaces. Oops. We've got multiple program administrators serving the same customer. So BPA, DOE, and local utilities. Yeah. Same facility, different sectors. Industrial site and wastewater, the same site. Same kind of utilities, multiple federal agencies at the same base. Oh, interesting. Yeah. So you like FEMP and DOD, for example. Same utilities. Okay, multiple utilities not working together. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting one. The multiple utilities not working together where there's electrification. So if you get a gas utility that's doing their thing and an electric utility that is, I'm going to say this the right way, it is making some foray into electrification. And there's a range of what that looks like, I know, across North America. Lastly, the unintentional multi-jurisdiction, which is multiple programs serving the same customer in different geographies. Whew. Okay, that's good. I think, okay, so this is good. And we will capture all this and try to put it into a format that I think is a little more attractive than what I've got here to help you all kind of wrap your heads around it. So if you're thinking about your area, John Feldman living in the GTA, Greater Toronto area, he's got lots of LDCs, lots of local utilities, and lots of other agencies. There's Ontario, the province has a government. There's all kinds of things going on at different levels, cities and things. And so it's going to wrap your head around that. Again, just picking on John, just to see your camera there, but in your good sport. But yes, I feel like it applies to all of you and all the places you all work. Okay, next dimension to this. The dimensions of sharing. This is what I called out. As I was thinking about programs that can do those kinds of spans across multiple jurisdictions, I thought of a couple of ways it could, that the collaboration, for lack of a better term, could work. So one is sharing costs. So one way to do it is, again, if you got two utilities that kind of do the same type of thing, or one's a gas and one's an electric, serving the same customer or sets of customers, they could, quote unquote, go every other cohort. I'll buy this time, you buy the next round, kind of thing. And kind of like basically do it that way. Or they could split costs for a cohort. And so kind of divide it in half, or somehow, basically do it that way, or allocate costs by customer. So if there's a couple that are members of one utility and two out of 10, the other 8 are part of another, they could basically divvy that up. The things that are easy to be called out. So again, sharing the cohort costs is one way that comes to mind. Next is, I'd say, marketing and recruiting. So again, again, if you think about one geographic area, this could become like a thing. I could imagine, right? So the Seattle area, again, picking on that, the Puget Sound area, where when you try to market to one organization, it's really easy for those messages to kind of hop across to other jurisdictions. And so how do you make other programs aware of what you're doing? And so that if opportunities do come up or questions do come up, that they can kind of cross recruit. So have some level of awareness at a minor level, or actually have full on going to sharing costs where they actually are splitting costs for the cohort for recruiting and so on. There's a couple of dimensions that I thought of. I've not thought of all things, and so we're going to go back to the poll. What other dimensions of sharing across jurisdictions are there? So what are other ways that a multi-jurisdictional program could work? By the way, I'm assuming sharing is caring. Sharing is how this is going to work, right? Because otherwise they're just kind of competing against each other, and then I wouldn't call it multi-jurisdictional, or they're just kind of coexisting, which I guess is not horrible. But I think the main reason people wanted to talk about this is how these things can work together. So the first feedback is piggybacking on implementation contracts. Nice. Yep. So I'll pick on that real quick. So a lot of jurisdictions, utilities, and other kinds of program administrators, typically their SEM program may come after a big kind of a turnkey C&I program or industrial program or commercial program, and it's like targeting big retrofit kind of things. And those are already out in the field. You got people out there driving customers into it. Why not piggyback in the back of that and use that to perhaps get leads or find opportunities, savings measures that really be SEM appropriate.
Chad, sorry, that was mine. It's more a contracting mechanism. So if a jurisdiction like did an SEM program and we really liked it, there's ways for us to kind of piggyback on that contract, so we don't have to bid it like uniquely. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. Nice. Okay. Thank you for correcting me rather than me making up stuff. Nice. Okay. Thanks, Emma. And yeah, calling out the folks in the Puget Sound area, because I do have a mix of utilities that are all generally work pretty well together. Let's see, other dimensions: sharing lessons learned, models. Yeah, I guess sharing models. I've definitely seen that where program, they've already getting the data from the customer, and they may be working on electric, but they've got this gas data. And so perhaps the gas utility can pay for the gas model, or again, and then figure out a way to kind of make that kind of work out. Access to incentives and grants for non-resource benefits of SEM. What are some examples? Could someone type in some of those into?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I'll type it in.
Thanks, Kim. No, go ahead.
I was thinking like innovation grants. People who are
Mm-hmm.
SEM practitioners might get good at things like emerging tech or other things like that. So leveraging other types of agencies whose metrics are not resource acquisition to bring additional money into sort of advanced projects that SEM participants might be doing is one example. And that's a type of multi-jurisdiction. I mean,
Sure.
I think it's a little bit looser than these multi-utility models.
Yeah. Well, yeah, to your point. And I think it's one of the things, as I was thinking about this meeting, about this session, and it's like, in some ways it's like, well, this is gonna be an exciting topic, multi-jurisdiction SEM. And it's like, it sounds kind of dry, right? But I think it's so important. And I remember when we were at ACEEE at the summer study at the SEM Summit, and talking to some folks, or Pam, you're like, and some other folks were like, hey, we really got to get going if we're going to address climate change using our programs, and we're going to maximize what these programs can do. And one of the best ways to do that is, frankly, to leverage all the funding you can to drive as much positive change you can. And so if we're leaving things on the table, if we're not tapping into local like grants and loans that can drive other types of things, we're missing out. We might be missing out on some real opportunities to either to drive real change to make real meaningful impacts in our local communities, and perhaps again to affect the climate. So I think getting all these things working in the same direction as fast as we can get them working together is an imperative.
One area that I just put down, Chad, is
Yep.
just sharing funding or splitting funding to hire energy managers. And if you actually broaden this, if you incorporate maybe like wastewater utilities or water utilities, you could have just like conservation managers that are split costs with utilities for bigger customers or municipalities, right? So sharing the cost to actually get the resource in the door and the expertise could be another way in which sharing is split.
That's great. That's great. I'll call it a couple other things. And thanks, Wendy. Yeah, and Wendy and I are riffing on this topic, like, thinking about this coming into it, and it's been great. Workshops. So having parts of a single workshop or an entire single workshop dedicated to another, either to another utility, to another utility fuel, or to another type of thing, like Kim used the example of the innovation grant type of thing, or it could be like this, like those the loans, like those kinds of things. It could be, again, we have the DOE thing called out here, and I would say DOE and EPA both have programs and resources that can be leveraged. And again, just that, it's like they want you to use their things, and so if you can, that's good for them, and it ideally would be saving you cost, theoretically. Let's see, leveraging national accounts. That is always a tricky one. I know Cascade, for example, works with I wouldn't say a lot of national accounts, but I know a few known national accounts, if you will, that they've worked with for a long time. And I assume, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Pam or anyone else from Cascade, it can be tricky because those are national ones that don't have programs in certain areas they can tap into, but then do in others. And so they're trying to kind of, how to say this the right way, have solutions that work for all their sites that they can, or how do they kind of make it work across all those types of offerings?
I think that recruiting actually could be a good one too, not necessarily even a utility that is participating in SEM, but willing to have a good relationship with another utility, another program doing SEM, right? And sharing the customer relationship they have as a form of actual customer service, right? Like, hey, we have a great program we know of, why don't you go ahead and consider it? That's kind of another way in which you can share, which is, your relationships.
That's great. That's great. Yeah. I think to your point, Wendy, I think a common theme here, no matter what, is, for any of your programs you work on, wherever they are, kind of mapping out, not stakeholders, but mapping out like who are the other players, if you will, in your neck of the woods. And so to think about that and at least have conversations, you may not be aware of things that, like some of their goals they have or certain offerings that they have. And so having those conversations with them, and also I'd say sometimes things change. Calling it like the bottom left here, demand response and IDSM, integrated demand side management. That was something we talked about as a group here, integrating those things with SEM a year and a half ago or so. And definitely, I would say, typically most utilities, the power of folks where the DR lives is different than the efficiency, where that world is. And so they got different goals and different budgets. And so and it's just like, well, we can't share, can't talk. Just stay in your lane. Things are changing very quickly. And I mean, I'm making some broad statements across all utilities, but the amount of changes to the grid right now, like, for example, like the types of demands that are happening on the grid related to like the fleet electrification and building electrification as well. So on the demand side, as well as what's happening to the grid on how renewables are coming online at such a rapid pace, and those renewables have some constraints that I think a lot of utilities, and again, especially the ones in the West that I know of that I'm pretty tight with, it is like all hands on deck. Like they got like multiple teams trying to figure these kinds of things out. How do they address their larger goals of renewable integration or addressing this very rapidly changing load? And SEM can be a huge way to kind of bring these things all together. So if you work in an area where the power folks that run the DR programs told you to take a hike 3 years ago, they may be interested in talking now. I'll just go ahead and put that out there. I'm not guaranteeing, but things have changed and are changing wildly fast. All right, this is a great one. One more question, I think. This is working. All right. What is the most challenging aspect to multi-jurisdiction SEM? If you want to phrase it in a way that, how to say it the right way, that we want to do something more with as the North American Collaborative, then feel free to do that. Do you follow? So being able to say, hey, we're working on some resources and things like on how we describe the value of SEM, some of the benefits of it. And so if there's some things that we can work on as a group, then we're definitely always interested in that. And again, things changing so quickly. Good, Wendy.
What I'm seeing coming up here a lot is reporting, which also goes back to one of the evaluation survey responses that we heard consistently was just the level of reporting requirements from the different program administrators is vastly different. And standardizing some sort of reporting requirement would make it easier and more cost effective for everybody. So that's we're hearing that here too, right? This is where almost it's like the rubber hits the road when you connect the two different types of utilities that have different reporting requirements. You've really got that different level of effort and different costs for the different utilities too. So that's kind of a thread I'm starting to see when we think about, how to streamline things and make things a little bit easier on implementers.
I know one thing I kind of, as you say that, Wendy, I kind of think of it. I know you've got some experience from a little bit of experience from California programs, and I assume Glenda could chime in or some other folks here on the call. Some of the things I just described, like these being able to tap into some local government programs or government regulations, that may work fine in some parts of the U.S., for example, in the Northwest, but in California, that may trigger a little siren may go off about free ridership, and so some of those things I could imagine could get complicated quickly. Not to say that it shouldn't happen, but it can just get messy. Looking at the notes here also, yeah, like Jay Mullen, I like laughing at the people as a challenging aspect. Yeah, customer experience seamless. In my opinion, yeah, that should be the number one thing. But it's tricky, as you all know. Some savings, perceived competition, yeah.
The slight and major differences in the offerings too, I've seen completely derail conversations with two utilities. One utility having an SEM offering that looks like X, another one having an SEM offering that looks like Y. They try to come together and neither one will be able to remove their requirements. And then that kind of benefit to the customer falls apart because sometimes I think we as utilities kind of can't get out of our own way.
Yeah.
I think this time commitment one is a big barrier with customers. They only have so much time to spend thinking and talking with people about energy, and sometimes it's with their utility, sometimes it's with other programs, but sometimes doing both is too much.
It's a great point, Greg. I mean, yeah, man, wow, I hear you loud and clear. And definitely, Greg's been doing SEM for a while, and I know a lot of other folks have as well, that they know, again, just how critical the customer time is. And so if they have to make an energy policy for their electric utility program, and then their gas utility requires something similar but different, or a different type of opportunity register to list all their projects, or they have to maintain two different model tools, like performance tracker kind of tools, boy, it really can fall apart quickly. Or yeah, do they have to be a part of two different cohorts, for example, and go double up on their workshops? That could be a non-starter. Who's the SEM vendor to use if they both have a vendor?
Mhm.
Yeah. The answer is Stillwater. Just kidding. It's BIC. Just kidding. It's
I would say, someone touched on recruitment here. That is, I mean, I think there's a win-win, as we all know, but convincing everyone that there's a win-win between the two utilities to get the customer on board is a challenging discussion.
yeah. And then if you're recruiting a national, for example, a multi-site one, and you're spending time, that's where it gets really messy. If you're spending time, who's paying for, let's say Jay Mullen here is recruiting from a national chain, or someone that he meets with the headquarters. They've got a national spread. Well, how much time does he spend trying to get all the rest of the folks to get on board if he doesn't have the contracts locally with those other vendors, with those other providers? So then no one ends up pursuing kind of that bigger approach. Yeah.
Yeah, Kim, that's a good point. I think another thing too, when we think about that is we talk about reports, but also forms, right? Like if your SEM customer has to just do different filings for the different utilities too, right? Then you've got doubling the effort for an SEM coach as well, trying to make sure that they're keeping track of that type of thing, when really the question is, is there a way to combine those forms?
This is great. Well, in my opinion, this is great food for thought. I know, we love these kinds of discussions where it's like a lot of seeding questions to you all, and riffing with you all is our favorite kind of webinar. So thank you all for being great sports and participating in that. So I will keep this poll up for now. So if you do think of other things, you want to type them in, please do so, and we will transcribe these into the PowerPoint that we can share back with the group. But for now, we will go to our next topic, which is a report out, the recap from the SEM Summit. And a big thanks to Jonah from ACEEE who put together these slides. So this is the group photo. You can see a bunch of great looking people here, happy as can be to not be on the beach, instead be dedicated to SEM inside this big building.
Looked overcast anyway, so
yeah, that's the thing. It's always freezing cold. So bizarre. So yeah, let's get into it. We had an opening icebreaker that Wendy let us in, and we do a picture of the stage before this. So you're basically going to see two lines facing each other. This used to be one giant line, and with the most experienced people in SEM on one end, and the newest people to SEM on the other. And then Wendy kind of got them in this big group, had them fold in half. So then you had the newest meeting the oldest, and everywhere in between. And so you can see a bunch of lovely folks there, all getting to know each other and asking them, what is SEM? And so got some great responses. People shared some of their responses or thoughts on what it was all about. But you can see here a few of the top four. Wendy, do you have a favorite one of these four here?
Not really, but I think one of the things that I thought that was great about this activity is that it really led into the rest of the conversation that we were having, which was having program administrators, evaluators, and implementers come together and define where SEM should be headed into the future. And so what we did really is we kind of said okay, what's our gold standard? What is SEM? And you had people that had 2 years in the industry and people that had, 15 years in the industry side by side making up what SEM was. And I thought that was probably one of the highlights for me, for sure.
It's great. It's great. Definitely a fun opening topic. So then we went into our next topic, which was we had downloaded with essentially all the largest, not just largest, the best evaluation firms of North America, and got feedback from them. Marie Claude is on, for example. Thank you, Marie Claude, for participating and giving us some sharing insights with us. But we came up from that group with a list of the top 5 most common challenges. I'm sorry, a number of challenges, but then we had basically in these breakouts, you can see one of the breakouts here, and then they had voting based upon those. And so we had the top 5 challenges that came out of the voting process. And so from these, you can see some customer challenges. So, actually back to Greg's point about being too time intensive, that was called out, for example, with a couple of solutions that people can take. And again, so one of the core questions that we'd asked the program evaluators was like, yeah, what do you keep seeing again and again that you would love to have as a market us move past, and so that you can provide some other kinds of insights on how to elevate these programs. And so that was one of the kind of seed questions we'd given the group that they'd responded to. You see some other ones here as well. The question, for example, around uncertainty around what persistence is and cost effectiveness. And there's a number of different ways to do that. Not only kind of from an M&V standpoint, like a savings counting standpoint, but also kind of like a transformation kind of I wouldn't say like a religious question, but yeah, it can be or a philosophical question, maybe is a better way to describe it. So there's some questions around that, and again, some inconsistencies across programs. Anything else? Do folks have, that were there, go ahead, Wendy's gonna say, do people have things that really kind of stood out to them that really kind of
yeah, the only
discussion?
The only thing I'd say is that our intent with this activity is to build upon it, right? And so we've got those lists of challenges that the evaluator said, hey, we're working on this with SEM. How do we move forward on it? We're developing solutions. And so we want to actually put that into some sort of like guidebook or something like that, where we can say, hey, is this a challenge that you're experiencing? Is this an evaluation recommendation you got back? Here are some proposed solutions that, the SEM community has come to ideate on. And so there's more detail here that we're going to be kind of hopefully putting up on the website or something like that, kind of once we get a chance to dig into it more. So this is just kind of a starting conversation, but it was really interesting to see what people came up with.
It's great. It's great. More sharing, more discussions is better than less, and definitely getting people talking about these topics. Sharing, frankly, in some cases, remember Kim and I can remember specific conversations Kim Crossman and I have had over the last 10 or 15 years on some of these topics. And we just have the conversation. We're like, okay, well, we figured that one out. And we move on. We never talk about it again. And then realizing that other folks, they weren't there at that table when she and I were talking about it. And they have questions on this stuff. And I know that's something actually Kim's been working on some other fronts. But it's interesting. Yeah. How do we bring people along and educate them on some of the things that, so that we can either accelerate the market, perhaps to kind of get in the same page on some of these things, or share some of the learnings, or perhaps some of the things have changed. And so there are some needs to rethink some of the old assumptions on how we go about some of this. So again, more communication is a good thing. Next, decarb. So this one came up from the voting the members had, and so we spent some time on this, discussing what some basically actions that people could be taking, organizations should be taking, or we should be taking, I guess I'd say, related to addressing decarbonization within SEM through our programs. And we had these topics that came up, and people basically, then we discussed what these things meant, and then put them onto big long pieces of paper that are represented here in the green, orange, and blue boxes, but they represented these different timeframes. some of which were not that hard, pretty easy to wrap your head around. And so those generally went into the short term. And then the ones that were really hard or were just hard just to wrap your head around how to even proceed with this end up in the long term. It was the discussion, in my opinion, was amazing. Just hearing the difference of opinion from people in the same industry, from people in the same region, people in the same company even had different opinions on some of this about how hard or easy or how fast or what these things meant. It was a very rich discussion. What other insights do people have on that? Again, Wendy, or I know a number of the folks that were in the room then that day that have other thoughts.
I think one of the things that became clear for me during this discussion was that the skill set is there. The tools and resources may need to be created, but the skill set that the SEM firms have, that the program administrators have, and the willpower to start tackling some of this stuff is there. And this will show up in the next slide, but it's like, how can what's like the one thing that the North American SEM Collaborative can do really came to light for me during that discussion.
I have a question about this, if we have time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see a whole lot about how we report program results when we're doing energy efficiency and electrification at the same time. This is a topic we're working on for one of our clients in Canada. You're going to have metrics that contradict each other. You're going to reduce the load and you're going to increase the load. And how can you report on both at the same time and add them up? Is that something that was discussed? I see all of those great ideas that seem to be more at the participant level, but what about from the program administrator perspective?
Wendy, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think so first of all, we got halfway through this conversation. It's a conversation we need to continue. So we had these 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper and we had a whole stack we still didn't get through. So this is just a start to the conversation. And we really did keep it at the customer level. That said, I think the higher level conversations that we need to have is where we think the North American SEM Collaborative can help create like a conversation around it, right? So how do you do that? I know Energy Trust of Oregon, I was actually just in a conversation about negative savings and what do we do now with electrification and negative savings? What does it mean? Because what is the real cost, right? There's maybe the stuff we're reporting on, but there's also the actual, grid load that we're supporting, so yeah, that's something that we didn't tackle.
That's fine. I think you have plenty to work on with everything that's in there. I was just curious to know if that's a topic that had come up.
No, not during this discussion, but it's a good one.
I think, yeah, Marie-Claude, the nature of that topic you bring up is kind of tied, like I see that definitely a similar thread in the first two items of the long-term bucket here, which is they're kind of products of the identity of that of the program administrator. Do you follow? So in other words, the programs that the program administrator runs are almost a reflection of who they are and what they can do and what their mission is. And so that's why these were down here. It's like having dedicated incentives for GHG reductions or having program delivery budget for those GHG reductions. Like that is for an organization, a program administrator that exists. Their programs exist because of the mandate that drives energy efficiency as a thing that they can pursue. To be able to change that can take years. And so then, to your point, then how you account? What is your accounting for that? And like Wendy said, is it sometimes in energy efficiency it's often like avoided energy use, but avoided energy use is not the same as it can often be a normalized number compared to the absolute emissions reductions that typically people focus on in the climate space. Where you're like, okay, I want to see less particulate going in the air, less GHG going into the air. Full stop. I don't care. Not normalized. I want less. That's that. And then, yeah, to Wendy's point, how do you jam that together with avoided energy use? Deep thoughts. Let's keep going. So yeah, to Wendy's point, we will be discussing we'll continue the decarbon discussion at our next QMR. Is that November 9th? Wendy, we will get back to you all on what the date is. I was just trying to find that date, and now it's in this slide. So we will have a QMR for members, which may or may not be on November 9th.
It is November 9th.
November 9th it is. Great, everybody. Look forward to November 9th, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 o'clock Pacific. And we will be continuing that conversation. So, right, let's get into, actually, sorry. All right. Yeah, I'm kind of moving fast. So let's go into a quick, kind of not a housekeeping item, but kind of a heads up. And this is a very much an abbreviated point, but it would just to let you know, if for those of you who did attend the Northwest SEM Collaborative Fall Workshop last week, you may have heard a little bit of news, and so we just wanted to pass along that news to the rest of the SEM community that attends our events. We will have more details shared at our QMR for our members, who we assume will want to go into a greater level of detail. But what we were prepared to do today is just to share some high-level talking points about what was discussed last week. So here are the talking points. I'm basically gonna, you know what? I'm gonna sit quietly and let you read them in peace. Wendy, can you raise your hand when you've finished reading? Okay. Can I go one more hand? Greg, okay, all right. So I'll provide a little bit of backstory really fast. Oh, thanks, John. Which is, those of you who don't remember, so one, the Northwest SEM Collaborative has been around for, I guess, 10 years this year. 2012 was the first year they did an event, and they've had 10 or 11 events over the years. As well as done a number of things, created all kinds of amazing solutions that have really helped the SEM space. Other regions of North America basically kind of sort of took note and came to some of those events and started kind of seeing what was going on. The most notable of those groups, of the regions, was the Northeast, and they had their sort of their own collaborative group that has met a number of times over the years and done some things as well. But then about 5 years after the Northwest Collaborative started, a number of us from that group, from that leadership team, said, hey, what if we convened a group, like a North American wide group, like at one of the summer studies? And we kind of asked the question, and people said, yeah, we would get together. And we had our first event, I think, 5 years ago, 2017, right? Yeah. And it was great. But basically it was kind of like so it's kind of started as like almost a spin-off of the Northwest Collaborative. And in the time, especially right after it got started, we made some semi-conscious decisions around what our scope was in the North American, to kind of make sure we weren't duplicating it, to be kind of complementary. So yeah, one, just wanted to call out the amazing things the Northwest has done. The Northwest is administered by the NEA, the Northwest Energy Efficiency Alliance. And with that, NEA, as a market transformation organization, does not administer initiatives or organizations or anything else forever. They do have a market transformation plan for basically everything they do. And so with that, there was a timetable. And so in the last couple of years, the Northwest has been looking at, okay, where do they go once that current situation, for lack of a better term, changes? And so they've been exploring some options, having some conversations, and essentially the North American and Northwest groups have verbally agreed in principle to integrate the Northwest scope and function into the North American scope and function by basically by December of 2024, by end of 2 years from now. So that is the high-level principle. There'll be some things we'll be developing an MOU and a transition plan, some other things, but basically the leadership teams of both organizations met and agreed that this all sounds like a good idea. So I will stop there, and Greg can correct what I just said, or or fill in or add some great color.
No, I think it's all good, and looking forward to the future combination of the two groups. I think it's going to provide a lot of great minds in the Northwest to the effort moving across North America. So I'm really excited of this this transition.
Great. John Feldman raised his hand, so we'll call on John.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I mean, thank you, Chad. I can't find out how to put my hand down. I just kind of, and maybe you said this already and I was momentarily distracted, but I'm assuming that there's a reasonable amount of overlap in terms of people between these two. It's not like always are they just one or two people that are in both?
Yeah, there's a reasonable overlap, and how to say it the right way. But I think there are some people that are members of one and not the other that are in, like, for example, some that are in the Northwest that are members of the North American or not.
Like your classic Venn diagram.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's some really interesting things for the North American that have always intrigued, Craig and Wendy and myself and other leadership team members, including kind of integrating these scopes together. So that it's kind of a, how to say it the right way, and not an easier sell, but kind of a clearer value proposition. So if you work for a utility in
like
the Northwest, what's that?
No, well, like me, it's kind of the Northwest was always a harder sell to say, well,
Nice.
why the heck are you speaking to people out in the West Coast? They just a bunch of surfer dudes and don't really. But yeah, so yeah, I mean that makes. I mean, I still did it anyway, but that makes sense. I guess my question was somewhat philosophical in just, we're not really losing anything with this because there's a bunch of folks who are in both anyway, and it just means we've got one group that's helping out the whole of North America, which certainly
John,
has. So go ahead.
No, I was going to say too, I think the other thing that we're really looking forward to is strengthening the regional groups as well, right? So we're hoping that this not only bolsters North America, but it also bolsters regional groups, right? Because there are regional issues that we want to support.
Fair enough.
And there's a lot of stuff going on nationally that we want to be able to tap into as well. And so I think that's one of the things that's exciting about this opportunity is looking at how do we create regional hubs. And so we'll get more into that into the QMR, right? But it's like, where does this lead us? Where could we go? What does the community want it to do? How do we elevate the Northwest SEM work, continue that great work? And how do we elevate the North American work, jumpstart the Southeast, right, work with their regional issues too? So I think it really has the benefit for us to expand and bolster North America in general with SEM.
Thank you for the indulgence.
Yeah.
That's great. Definitely, yeah, very exciting stuff. Like we said, the Northwest leadership team, they are they're kind of spearheading, spelling out what their transition plan is going to be. Of course, the North American group will be involved in it, but it'll be definitely led by a group. But definitely the North American will be, to Wendy's point, how to say it, like kind of scoping out the opportunities here, or how this kind of ties into what the North American Collaborative is doing, and how do we then, like she said, use some of the experiences from the Northwest to then be able to then say, hey, how do we kind of step and repeat the successes from there into other regions, the US and Canada. So definitely some exciting possibilities. So more to come, and definitely if you're a member, please do attend the QMR. We'll be discussing it in greater detail. It's still, even then, it'll be early stage, and so it's not like we're gonna have everything figured out, but we'll definitely be able to ask some good questions then, which is great. And again, get the juices flowing. All right, I think it is noon Pacific, and yeah, again, I'm in Central Time, so I'm not even sure what time it is. 2 o'clock, I think. Yeah, it's 2 o'clock here Central, 3 o'clock in Burlington, Vermont. But so great seeing everyone here today. So great having you all involved in the conversation. Please do attend the QMR. If you're not a member, reach out to your local leadership team member of the North American Collaborative and find out how to join. It's really simple. And I think that's a big step. Wendy or Greg, any other closing thoughts?
No, I
No.
will put my email address in the chat so people can email me if they're interested in becoming a member and joining QMR.
Great.
Nothing from me other than enjoy your pumpkin spice.
Everyone go get that latte now, or deodorant.
Excellent. All right, everybody.
Awesome.
Bye,
Thank
thanks.
you. Thanks,
Take care.
everyone.
All right. Bye.